There comes a point in every world where, when you look around, you see that the volcanoes have been tamed, the oceans have been explored, and a large percentage of the remaining enemies originated in your own experiments. Faced with these facts, you can choose to persist, fighting against the increasing claustrophobia of the world by telling yourself that maximalism is good, actually, or you can choose to move on and generate new worlds, until you find one with a name befitting a YouTube playlist. Samkar is what I was left with when I reached the end of this thought process for myself. It is a 500-year-old world with 5 important continents, plus dozens of smaller islands, many of which have been colonized by kobolds, littering the oceans. In the northwest region of the world, populated exclusively by the goblin civilization the Demon of Standards, is the Folded Continents, a brief look at which reveals the Ignorant Wastes, a desert which I would very much like to visit one day. Stretching across the north and northeast parts of the world is the Sunny Continent, home to the Lavender Ocean, an apparently cheerful disposition, and not much else. In the southwest corner of the map, we have the Land of Clapping, which hosts both the primary human, the Euphoric Unions, and goblin, the Cavernous Thief, civilizations, which are all jumbled together across the continent, mixed to the point that multiple high-ranking officials within the Euphoric Unions are actually goblins. Across a narrow strait to the east is the continents of Justifying, on which both Dwarf, the Craft of Taxes and the Wild Furnace, and both Elf, the Mechanical Oak, and the Skunk of Dabblers civilizations are forced to coexist. As the primary continent of the world, from which dwarven domination will soon emanate, the gods of world generation saw fit to balance the scales of power by placing a necromancer's tower in the same cradle of civilization from which the Craft of Taxes sprung. So that seems like a fun place to keep in mind for the future. And finally, in the southeast, we have the Land of Slowing, which is home to a largely failed human civilization that was terrorized and destroyed by a motley crew of megabeasts hundreds of years ago. Together, these continents and islands will be my home for the foreseeable future, and so I figured that, to be polite, I should take some time to say hello to my new neighbors before I begin connecting continents and sowing chaos in earnest. First, I greeted them diplomatically, by creating a small embassy from which I could send normal civilians on fact-finding missions to get a better idea of who the movers and shakers of each civilization were. And then I took that knowledge, plus some info I had found in Legends Viewer, created a dwarf adventurer named Zan Yoringed, and set out to say hi up close and personal. At first, I tried to meet my own queen, Catin Merchantai, but found that she was ensconced in a large and well-populated dwarven fortress called Floor Salves. It seemed like it might be hard to track her down, and I figured that once I inevitably built a mountain home, I would get to meet her anyway, so I moved on to my next target. But surprisingly, a fairy Beached Valley, druid of the Mechanical Oak, was also living in Floor Salves for some reason, despite at one point being imprisoned there. I still didn't want to sort through the many layers of Floor Salves though, especially just to meet an elf, so I once again moved on to my next target, which was Osime Hillworld, druid of the Skunk of Dabblers, living way down south in the forest retreat Adorstones. When I arrived in town, I immediately hit the trees, climbing up and collecting the names of the elves living in each treehouse. Slowly but surely I crossed anonymous elves off my list, until finally I realized that the home tree was pretty obviously where I should be looking, and stumbled across Osime herself, out in the open, willing to have a conversation with me. But presented with the opportunity to interact with the highest-ranking official in the elf civilization that posed the biggest threat to the dwarves of this continent, with 500 years of history totally unaffected by my personal desires leading up to this moment, I felt like I was standing with a piece of chalk in front of an entirely blank blackboard, and I had no choice but to make my mark. And so I bashed Osime with my mace, chased her across the field to do it again, and then finally completed my Franz Ferdinand-esque assassination of errors after one more trek. Then, with her books in hand, in the course of history and Samkar modestly changed by my efforts for the first time, I returned Zahn to the north, and left her there as a monument to the New World and all the potential paths I can push it toward. Thanks for watching, an extra thank you to those of you who support me on Patreon, and I'll see you next time.